Hi, and welcome back to Gavin's Sonex B. Well, I've been able to get a little bit of time in, an hour here, an hour there, in between all the other things. We're doing a lot of garden clearance at the moment because the weather's starting to pick up. Rather than being minus whatever it was a few weeks ago, we're now getting up to about 16 degrees C during the daytime this week. Full sun. Hasn't rained for about 3 weeks now, and spring has sprung, or is springing anyway. It's getting there, and so I've been doing a little bits and pieces, picking up what I can. The first thing I've done is I've joined the two halves back together again, and I will be riveting them and bolting them together, hopefully for the last time, imminently. So it looks a bit like this at the moment. What I've actually been doing is I have connected up the elevator push rod all the way through, and I'll jump underneath in a minute. So if I bring you round this way, you can see that if I pull the control stick backwards, woohoo, the elevator goes up and down. Awesome. Wasn't too difficult to do. And the other thing I've done is I've connected the seat belts to the rear anchor points, which I'll show you from underneath in a second, which were the last couple of things I had to do inside the tail cone, really. I can't remember whether I had connected the aerials up, but I've connected the main aerial up as well, and that's in place. Little bits and pieces, mostly things like that. So if I hop underneath, we'll have a look at the elevator push rod and the sleeve joint. So here we are. I'm lying on the floor, facing upwards, and we're looking directly up at the elevator push rod. And you can see there are 3 bolts holding the front half to the back half. I drilled them in situ down here, put pilot holes firstly in the sleeve on one side, and then drilled through once I'd got the elevator in the correct position with the push rod, with the control stick. And it wasn't too difficult. You can see a little bit more of the wiring installation in here, and the radio and transponder and the headphone wiring disappearing off up there. If I zoom back in again, there are the connection points for the seat belts, the rear anchor points, which are now installed and ready to go. And the seat belts, one of them is lying in the bottom of the baggage container. And that's about all there is under here. One of the last things to do before dropping it on its wheels is to fit the push rod that connects the tail wheel to the rudder horn. And so we'll go and have a look at that. So some of you may remember that I had a bit of an issue with the push rod for the tail wheel. It comes as a steel welded bar like this, And when I offered it up to the horn that sticks out of the side of the rudder and the lever which sticks out of the side of the tail wheel, it didn't line up very well because the angles on the end here weren't quite right, and the vertical displacement that I'm looking for is about 92 millimeters, and the one that I had was 118 millimeters, and that's quite a long way out. The best part of an inch. And so I contacted Sonex and they sent me another one, and that one arrived and it was better than the previous one, but still was at 107, so the best part of 10 millimeters out, more than that actually, 15 millimeters out. So I'm going to have a go at the advice that Kerry gave me, which was some of these may need to be bent. So I'm going to have a go at bending one. I've got two, so if I miss the first one up, I've got a second chance. So just to put you in the picture, here we go. This is the original one, which, as you can see, the vertical displacement on it is 118 millimeters. The second one was 107, and what I'm aiming for is 92, which is actually what the aircraft measures. So I'm going to put a bend right up here to bring the whole thing up slightly, and then a second bend down here to reline up the plate at the bottom so it sits flat on the arm that sticks out the side of the tail wheel. And to do that, I'm going to use the trusty hydraulic press. And so I've got it set up at the moment with a couple of wood blocks either side. I'm going to use a 1/2-inch socket as the bending thing to give me a 6mm radius, or 6.5mm radius, and have a go and gently tease it until it's somewhere close to what it needs to be. So I'm probably going to have to overbend it here and then compensate with a bend down here to get it back level again, or at that jaunty angle anyway, and end up with 92 millimeters. So wish me luck. I'll let you know what happens. Well, that did not go to plan, and it's a good job I have got to, because I made a fundamental error in that I thought that this was a solid bar, and it's not. It's a tube. So when I tried to bend it with the press, what it actually did was buckle it, and unfortunately collapsed the tube where the bend was. So I had another go, and this time I did a much better bend, which hasn't collapsed the tube at all, and all I did was put it in the vise so that the vise was clamped onto there, and then gave it a good tug from the other end and bent it the few degrees that it needed to go, and it's good. So I'm going to bend the other end now and see how that goes. Back in a minute. And so success! Bent it just by putting it in the vise and giving it a good pull, a little bit at a time, checking it actually against the aircraft each time, and the last time it fitted perfectly. I've just tried it back on my diagram, and within a couple of millimeters it's exactly as I predicted it. So I'm happy with that. So we've got a small bend at the top end and a small bend at the bottom end, just to level it all back out again. And so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to busy away and drill some holes and fit that. Now the good news about doing that is that once that's connected, I'm going to drop the aircraft down onto its wheels, because I've been quite busy and I've knocked off a few jobs, and I'm pretty much at the stage where I can drop it onto its wheels and see how it looks for the first time. Woohoo! So anyway, I'll go and fit this bit, and then we can have the fun and games of trying to get it off these tables and onto the floor. And then I can update you with all the other bits and pieces I've been messing about with. More later. And so, after putting in the cotter bolts and a few washers for spacing, a bit of lubrication and some split pins, the finished item looks like this. There we go, and hey presto, awesome, job done. So here we've got it a bit like that. So I'm happy with that. It seems to work all right. Everything lines up. It's all good. So I'll leave it at that. More later. Well, I've discovered I've made a mistake. Hope it's the only one. I've been assembling and disassembling the forward fuselage from the tail cone many times, and I've always done it exactly the same way, and it made sense to me. But because I'm about to join the two halves together for hopefully the final time and rivet and bolt them up, I've got the drawings for that particular function out, and lo and behold, I've been doing it wrong all this time. I'll show you what I mean. This is the join between the forward fuselage. I'll go wide angle. There we go. This is the join between the forward fuselage and the tail cone. And as you can probably see, I have got the forward fuselage skin on the inside of the tail cone skin. And it actually slides very neatly between the tail cone skin and the what do you call it, the upright that is inside. So if I show you the other side, you can see that the forward fuselage skin is on the outside of the inside, if you see what I mean, but it's also on the inside of the outside, if that makes any sense at all. It's actually slid in between the two parts, and it looked, I always assumed, you should never assume anything, I always assumed that this was the way it was supposed to go, because it made sense to me, but I didn't actually read the drawing. So it actually should be, or let's say the forward fuselage skin should be on the outside of everything, which kind of makes sense, so that you've got a rearward facing join, I suppose. Mechanically, I don't think it makes a huge amount of difference, but anyway, I shall do what I'm instructed to do. So I've got to pull it's a good job I didn't rivet it. I would not have been happy if I had riveted it and then found out. Anyway, I've got to pull the two halves apart, just 25mm, an inch or so. Slip the two skins round the other way and push it back together again. Luckily, I don't have to undo anything else because there's enough movement in the elevator push rod connection to the control stick to allow me to do that. I might have to do something with the rudder. No, the rudder pedals, they're on springs, so I think it'll be fine. It might resist me a little bit, but I think it'll be all right. So anyway, I'm going to busy away and do that now, and we'll have a look at it after I've done that. More later. Well, actually, that was a lot easier than I thought it was going to be. And so, as if by magic, the forward skin is now on the outside as per the instructions on both sides, and everything fits together, everything lines up, and I'm a happy bunny. Anyway, I'm going to start putting some bolts in and maybe a few rivets, and we'll see what happens. More later. So 12 bolts and 28 rivets later, oh actually 29, 30, 32 rivets later, it's done, and it looks something like this. So it's all looking rather spangly. And the other side is exactly the same. A couple of the nuts were quite difficult to get hold of, but after a bit of jiggery poking around, or pokering around, managed to get them all done up tight, happy with them, and the rivets went in really easily. All the bolts were what you'd call tight holes. So what I mean by that is that they didn't just fall in the hole, they required a small amount of persuasion to go in, not so that they're binding particularly, but just so that they are not loose, if you see what I mean. So they were just tapped in with a small hammer gently until they were in flush, and then put the washers and nuts on and tighten them up, and they were all pretty good. Anyway, that's enough for this video, I think. So now we have, for the first time, our aircraft fuselage in one piece. We have a working rudder system and steerable tail wheel. We have working elevator. And the only thing that hasn't been done really on the fuselage as such is the canopy. We've got the canopy to do, the two fill-in bits between the vertical stabilizer and the horizontal stabilizer, and of course the bottom, which I'm going to leave off for the time being. and the bottom of the tail cone is still off at the moment. Next thing to do is to drop it down onto its wheels, but first of all I'm going to have a bit of a clear up. So that's enough for tonight. I'm going to go and have a nice cognac now to celebrate, and a good night's sleep. See you next time.